This session we're going to be talking about experiences in research, and our first speaker will be Alexander Van den Hill, and a few words. He's a project manager at SURFnet, the NREN for the Netherlands. He's responsible for network services. He's also active in many international NREN activities like the GLIF, GNA, and many other initiatives. And he's driven by bringing NRENs together so that we can have better collaboration. Alexander, the floor is yours.
Dankjewel, Yousif. I'm sure you know what it means.
That's neat.
Yeah, thanks. I'm from the Netherlands. Who knows where the Netherlands are? I hope more, because my next slide is a little bit unreadable here. I'm representing SURF today, and I'm very glad that I'm here. We are the NEAAR collaborative of the Netherlands, and we serve several types of institutes, from higher education to vocational institutes. We connect research institutes. We also connect university medical centers, and that kind of stuff. We are really a partner in acceleration here. We focus on ICT for our institutes, and it's always our goal to provide services and technologies that helps our institute to excel, of course. We bring them together, and we try to make our services sustainable. We try because we know that we are on the edge of the market, and it's not always possible to do things very sustainable. We take the lead in innovation. Not because we are a research company, but because we know that strong innovation takes away the barriers for our members, and that's what we do. SURF consists of 3 working companies. SURF Sarah, they do the high-performance computing part of SURF. We have SURF Market, and they are working on purchasing type of things. They arrange cloud services, software licensing for our community, and they also buy licenses for digital content. And SURFnet, the last organization I'm with, we provide trusted access, collaboration tools, and last but not least, our network. We have our network in place since 1988, so 30 years today. We're quite a small country, but we have 13,000 kilometers of fibers in the network, and every year we carry between the 100 and 200 petabytes of data. We don't only offer the fixed network, but we also try to create SURF Wireless for our customers. And that's a wireless service. They buy wireless or EduRoam as a service from us. And we offer it at 14 locations as of today. This is the map of the Netherlands. Again, it's quite unreadable here. We're a very small country, quarter of the size of Jordan, I would say, 300 by 150 kilometers. But since the Golden Age, we are used to collaborate with other countries abroad all over the world. During the Golden Age, we did it with ships, and now we collaborate with ICT. And we cannot do that alone. We have to work with others, and we need an architecture for that, a global network architecture. So we work with lots of parties in the NREN world to create this architecture. And the vision of this architecture is that we create bandwidth and services in support of the research and education organizations that scale at a global level. And we are doing that by creating architecture documents, not only for technology, but also for how to form the collaboration, how to share cost, and that kind of things. So we defined that in 6 very readable, easy documents. It's not rocket science. It just defines how the reference architecture looks, how open exchange points, GXPs I call them here, look, how we arrange operations with each other, And you can all find that on this website, GNA-RE.net, if you want to take a look at it yourself. We started with GNA with a pathfinder, with ANA. Eric Huizer, where is he? Talked about it yesterday. We did that with 5 willing enable parties: NorduNet, Internet2, GÉANT, Canary, and SURFnet. And YesNet was also involved at that time. And at that point in time, I think it's 5 years ago, we had 24 10G links across the Atlantic Ocean. All procured in splendid isolation, no collaboration at all. But at this point in time, we said we want to push the envelope here on the bandwidth, and we did that really together. And it was based on trust. At that moment in time, we didn't put any documents in between. Later on, when it became more mature, we expanded that, and we wrote things down in a very simple memorandum of understanding, in which we defined the scope of the collaboration. And the things we wanted to achieve is to interconnect our networks, both on the North American side and on the European side, that we want to do joint network research, that we want to do joint application developments, that we coordinate this network jointly, and we also want to back up traffic with other parties, and we'll come back to that later. We also defined the governance structure of the collaboration. There's a small steering group and several working groups under that take care of the operations, of the engineering, of the cost sharing, and that kind of things. We touched upon this yesterday as well, the acceptable use policy. In principle, we don't have an acceptable use policy on the system. We only said it has to be somehow related to RNE. And for the rest, it's up to the connectors to define their own policy if they want. And in this MOU, we also defined the duration of the collaboration, how this works when somebody wants to join, when somebody leaves. How to handle external communications, and also how to share the cost of this collaboration, of this system. And we defined that in a separate document, but it's very simple, very simple. We have 3 links in the system. One of the links is paid by GÉANT, one of the links is paid by Internet2 and Canary on the North American side, and one of the links is paid by NorduNet and SURFnet. And it seems that it more or less balances out, so that's very easy, and we just moved on with this. I told you about the backup agreements that we made, or joining, opening up the system for others. So what we did, we added YesNet to the mix. They are our mission network in the US, serving high energy physics people. So there was an aim for them to connect to Geneva for the Large Hadron Collider. We also put the NEAAR link from Indiana University into the mix, and this is active now. And as of next year, also Japan will join the mix, and then we will have a 900 gigabit system across the ocean, not in splendid isolation, but with parties alone, but with full collaboration, coordination with each other. And again, we created a very small, lightweight MOU for that, and we created the template of this, so other parties can also use this. And what we have seen is that it is adopted by the Asia Pacific region. They are now working on the same method here. Pacific Wave, SURFnet, NREN, they are sharing their links across the Pacific Ocean and have one full system running here. And others are planning to join this as well, from Korea. Links from Seoul to Chicago are there, and we are talking about getting them into the mix as well. Another copy is Asia to Europe connectivity. From Japan, the NREN there, NRI, they are building capacity to Amsterdam. From Taiwan, they are planning to build capacity to Amsterdam as well. And again, European NRENs, GÉANT, SURFnet, NorduNet, and NRENs from the Asia-Pacific region set together, ARNet, SingleRAN, and Timestar CC, and they are planning to build a 100 gig link from London to Singapore right now. And again, we're going into backup agreements, so it will be a fully resilient system in full collaboration with other NRENs. Yeah, and then I come to this one, this link that I just talked about that we are planning to procure from London to Singapore. It will run through your seas. You can look at it from the beach. You can see the bits flowing. So my question to you is, how can you join this collaboration here as well? There are many opportunities to build open exchange points. There must be interest for you to connect to Europe or to Singapore or to Africa or to Australia. And yeah, if you want to join this type of working together, the GNA folks are happy to help you on this. That's my presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Alexander. Our next person is Mark Williams. Mark is from Jisc and the manager of the UK access. So Mark is from Jisc and he's doing a lot of great work. Please.
Yeah,
and he can introduce himself.
I'll do my introduction. One is primarily making the end user experience better for the end user experience better for library resources. That's key, I think.
Sorry about that.
No. Okay. I'd ask you to guess where the UK is, but in the UK we don't know. Are we in Europe? Are we not in Europe? We haven't made up our mind yet. My colleague Esther, I think, introduced Jisc, and you probably got the idea we kind of tried to do a little bit of everything, and, you know, that's fundamentally true. I'm going to talk to you about single sign-on and virtual solutions to that, cloud-based solutions, but the reason why we do it is because we're middleware, and we link up a number of different things Jisc does. Obviously, we've got the network. Jisc participates in EduRoam. We've got about 350, 400 institutions in the UK involved in EduRoam. Works pretty flawlessly, unless there's a square in London called Tavistock Square, which I think has got 6 different universities represented in it. So if you ever walk around, you realise your EduRoam is changing very quickly, and that's one place where it can cause problems. And of course, Jisc, we participate in GÉANT, which is essentially the Federation of Federations of feed. So an end user in one institution can get a resource provider who might be registered with another federation. Key thing here is resources. Raison d'etre of Jisc is to get end users accessing academic resources. We have a special element of Jisc which deals with that, which is Jisc collections. And we've been very fortunate because they negotiate on behalf of the entire higher education sector, and that means when we're talking about people with, like Elsevier and Taylor and Francis, etc., we can negotiate the best price we can. Sometimes we're, less successful than we might be. What we are very successful on is negotiating the model license, and that's where we have key terms and conditions, such as counterstats, and one of them is ensuring single sign-on access via our federation. So we know UK users don't have to just use username and password with the publisher. They're actually being authenticated by their institution. It is the institution vouching for them to the publisher. That maintains the degree of anonymity, which is important because we find lots of pushback at the moment where publishers want as much information about the end user as possible, and we're saying, no, you don't need that. You can add personalization, but you don't need that necessarily. So that gives us some advantage there. And then services and apps. I think Dr. Talal yesterday was talking about one of the points of doing all of this is to actually improve the user outcome, the learning outcome. And we've got an area I think Esther talked about, which is data analytics, which again is key because that's how universities can determine who's doing well and why. And again, federated access is a key part of that, because to achieve that, we need to know exactly who the learner is, but we need to maintain that anonymity to anybody who doesn't need to know who that learner is. So the UK Federation, the idea is single sign-on. The institution deploys what we call an identity provider. The service provider has the other bit of software. It's registered in UK Federation metadata, which they continually update, and the end user authenticates with their own, effectively, LDAP directory in their institution. They can do that 24/7, and they don't have to do it on campus because we've moved beyond IP address. And it's the institution vouching to the publisher that they're who they say they are. Our federation started in 2007, probably prototyping a couple of years before that. So it was based on probably quite a lot of old tech. Fortunately, again, because we've been going so long, but you can always count statistics in a different way. We're the largest federation when it comes to members, and we're the largest federation when it comes to commercial academic participants, Elsevier, say Ebury, Taylor and Francis. But also in our federation, we have people like Adidas, because one of the university services, which are very common now, is offering students discounts. So they use federated access even for that. And we wanted to develop a level playing field. The key piece of source code that our federation works on is essentially Shibboleth, which is run by the Shibboleth Consortium. It's something we put money into to make sure it's free for use for all the institutions. But we also encouraged some third parties with a little bit of seed funding so they can go out to institutions and deploy the software if that was their choice to do. That's essentially a decade ago, and things have really changed now. We've got a huge move towards having cloud-based solutions. IT departments are often getting smaller, and they want a cloud-based solution they don't really have to worry about, they don't have to do updates with. It's not always the case. Again, it's a very wide continuum of types of institutions. Oxford University, as you can imagine, is superbly resourced. They have 150 service provider entities in our federation, internal services which staff and students will be logging into, and they put them in our federation, and that's fine. And they run it themselves, and if they have to update the service provider software, they're going to have to do it effectively 150 times. But that's fine, that's their choice. But we also wanted a deal for the smaller institution, particularly often now 16 to 18, where it's just not that's not their primary mission. We're having lots of mergers in our country, institutions joining together. Again, that's a time when they can really think about their identity management, and third-party solutions, can be expensive. So that's why we wanted a cloud-based identity provider solution. And they said, can you do it for us? So that's why we've created what we call Jisc Liberate. I didn't come up with the name or anything, but it was, as we were talking yesterday, there's only so many domains available, and that's one we could get. The key one for me is UK Federation aspect of Liberate, which is the identity provider software, but it can be a turnkey solution for EduRoam, GovRoam, which is EduRoam for government departments, for local councils, even for public libraries. Then we've got GÉANT, which is our non-web-based authentication. Essentially, we're going to have a proxy service as well, and a single console management, so once an institution subscribes, they can really customize it the way they want. Other aspects of why a cloud-based solution I think is very effective. It's automatically updated by our guys when a new version comes out. They, work 24/7 to get their heads around the new version, and then can get the update out. So it's far more secure, and also it helps us implement things such as the certify, security contact, and the research and scholarship attribute, which we use so institutions say we'll release this amount of information to these particular type of research organizations, which is different from saying we'll release, personal information to Elsevier, etc. And obviously reduce costs because the overheads go down, and any of these things we run, some of these things we basically try to run at a non-profit entirely because Jisc is a charity, and the more people who join means we can just lower the unit cost. So Liberate, it's very easy, you just subscribe, deploy a VPN usually for access to the LDAP, and there you go. And Obviously, again, we were talking about the end user, so one of the key things is log viewing, and we want to make sure that the libraries get all the stats they need so they can determine if they're getting value for money from the resources they're accessing, and maybe make an argument for buying others, and maybe make an argument for discontinuing with other ones. It's a very secure system. I'd leave that in the hands of the engineers who actually designed it. So if you do have any questions about how Liberate hosted IDP works or any of those other services, please just email me and I'll pass you on to the correct person who will actually give you the authoritative answer. And obviously it's customizable. We're currently on Shibboleth 3.4.1 at the moment, but eventually Shibboleth 4 will come out, and again, we'll do the updating so you don't have to worry about it. Also, the UK Federation, we participate in all the international forums. We're very keen on ensuring attribute creation and attribute use is correct. We're monitoring the situation such as RA21, which is where publishers are very scared of Sci-Hub and illegal use of content, so they want to improve discovery. We want that to happen too, but we also don't want it to be too much in control of some of the very big publishers. We want it to be a level playing field, so we're trying to keep them honest there. So there's a little bit of a policing role. And of course, most of this is basically on AWS. That's one aspect, so that's how you participate, obviously, in a federation. But the other thing is, as I said, our federation was created in 2007. It was literally on tin machines. I had some monitoring software on a machine under my desk. We've moved on from that now. We're all based in the cloud. But we wanted something which was extensible, which we could repeat. Maybe we want to run up. Now we've got a federation. We want to do another federation for another community. Maybe, for example, the farmer community or the law community, which isn't strictly in our remit. So we've developed a managed federation service. And again, this will be mainly cloud-based. We're offering all the different aspects you need to have, MDQ, metadata on demand distribution, a central discovery service. That's how, when somebody goes direct to, for example, Science Direct, the end user, and it'll say, where are you from? And then they've got to select the home institution. And that way, it's a very clear journey, and they know they're not being phished, and the credentials aren't going to be phished. And hands up, who booked into Marriott here directly? Hands up, who got an email saying the credentials are now possibly... Okay, it was a big data breach for Marriott this week that apparently people who are signed up to their awards programs, so credentials have been hacked, have been taken. So, that's one we want to avoid. We've got Woojin, which is a waithless URL generator, which again is so librarians can generate a link which goes directly to the content, and if the user's already signed in, they go straight through. Underhood is basically based on Azure. At the moment, our federation service would be through 4 different Azure regions. We're working with the University of Hong Kong. We're working with JUCC in Hong Kong. We're working with RAIONs in New Zealand. So we've got centres, I think it's in North Australia. We've got a centre in Hong Kong. We've got a data centre in Wisconsin. And the more partners we have, and I say partners because that's what we're doing, we're effectively trying to do this as cheaply as possible and reducing cost as we get more people involved, then the more data centers we can have. And everything is pretty much Dockerized. And again, for the technical stuff, email me and I will put you directly in touch with the guy who actually designed this, Dr. Rees. I'll skip that. Obviously, it's running reporting tools, GitLab, Jenkins, all backed up, obviously, in AWS. So really, what I'm saying is, if you want federated access, you want single sign-on, you can obviously devise your own federation, and there's a number of software solutions out there, but there's also some which we can provide pretty much off-the-shelf, cloud-based. And it can also be a journey as you participate. So yesterday I was speaking to quite a few of you, and I know there's some institutions who would really like to have federated access, single sign-on, but their NREN or their country isn't at a situation where you have a federation, single sign-on federation, and where they're not participating in EDUGAIN. If that's the case, we're actually happy in the UK Federation to have higher education institutions who don't have that option to join ours, and we'll put you in the EDUGAIN feed. We wouldn't really want that to be permanent, because we want federations to do their journey to participating in e-AGE18, but we welcome that. So, so we're really trying to offering different routes into federated access because it's a huge community, it's publishers, it is institutions, and the more people actually directly involved, the better the experiences for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. The next up is Kevin Meynell. And Kevin works at the Internet and at ICE-Hub. Yeah, as the manager of technical and operational engagement, supporting the deployment of key Internet technologies, including routing security, IPv6, DNS Sec, etc. He previously worked for GÉANT before joining Tirena, now GÉANT, and where he worked there for the next 16 years. Please let me introduce Kevin.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mark used to be my colleague, and so did Brook as well. So, in fact, even Philip did as well at the back. So we worked with a few people here. So this is something completely different. It's not directly related to NRENs, although it does affect the research and education community. But what we're trying to do is raise awareness of the importance of improving the security of the DNS, but also some of the new developments with respect to privacy technology in the DNS as well. I will point out that this is normally a 45-minute presentation, which I've got to get into 15 minutes. So this is a very abridged slide deck, but I'll hope to get the full slide deck up on the website, which might make some more sense at the end of all of this. So yeah, the DNS obviously is a pretty old internet technology, designed as a scalable distributed system. And it's been a pretty successful and become an absolutely essential service. But it was designed in an era when the internet was a relatively small group of users and systems, and historically hasn't really kept up with the sort of advances in security and privacy. Traditionally, DNS resolvers have been provided by ISPs, although increasingly they're provided now by third-party services such as Google and Cloudflare and Quad9, Dyn, etc. Okay, so this is actually the full slide deck. There was a new slide deck, but I'll skip through these. So the problem with the DNS, there's a number of limitations. In the sense that the first result received from received by a DNS resolver is actually treated as the correct answer by default. So this is very reliant on a host trusting that a response to a DNS query is correct. What this essentially means is it can be spoofed through cache poisoning. This is where incorrect or corrupt DNS data is introduced into the DNS resolver. You could have a man-in-the-middle attack, for example, through a compromised access router, which is redirecting the DNS queries to a name server that's returning forged responses. And you can also have incorrect incorrect IP addresses, which are diverting traffic to another computer. So, in other words, the computer of an attacker. The other limitation is that by default, DNS queries are not encrypted, but I'll come back to that in a few more slides. So, there's a number of things that can be done to help improve this situation. And one is DNS Sec, which is a set of extensions to the DNS that allow resolvers to authenticate the origin of the data that's stored in the DNS. So that will allow it to be checked whether it's been modified in transit. And another advantage is you can actually authenticate that a record doesn't actually exist. So somebody can't insert a record and direct you to a fake site or whatever. It's doing this through digitally signing DNS records using public key cryptography. And these are authenticated through a chain of trust, starting with a set of verified public keys in the root zone. That is a trusted party. Domain owners sign their DNS zones with their own private keys, and those keys are then authenticated by the parent zone up the hierarchy. So you can step up through the hierarchy of the DNS to authenticate whether a record is genuine. This is why it's important that TLDs sign their zones, otherwise this chain of trust is breaking. But what it means is that the information entered into the DNS by the domain name holder is the same information received by the end user. Okay, so current state of DNS. And this is why we needed the new slide deck, not the old one, because this actually has Central Asian from the last time I did this presentation, but luckily I can remember the statistics. So it's actually around 12% of all global DNS queries are now validated with DNSSEC. This is actually dropping somewhat in the last year. It was 15% about a year ago, now down to about 12%. But the good news is, in this region, and it's a shame I don't have the graphics here because they're on the other new slide deck, but something like 17% of queries in the Middle East region are DNSSEC authenticated. So that's actually above average, which is good news. And in fact, the country which has the most queries DNSSEC authenticated in this region is actually Yemen. And it's something like 30 or 40%, which is pretty impressive. Now, bear in mind, they're using probably third-party DNS resolvers, like maybe Google, so that would explain a lot of that reason. But actually, yeah, the situation particularly in the eastern part of the Middle East, is actually quite positive. In North Africa, less so. There's only around 4 to 6% of queries are being authenticated. At the CCTOD level, this is not quite so good. I think only one CCTLD has the top-level domain, the CCTLD signed. That's Saudi Arabia. I think there's a couple of countries have this as an experimental, have implemented this experimentally. And in the case in North Africa, so I appreciate the Middle East includes North Africa as well. I think it's only Tunisia and Morocco, I think, have DNSSEC signed their zones. Okay, but why do you need DNSSEC if you already have a TLS certificate? Well, TLS, it's serving two functions. One is to authenticate the identity of the domain name holder, and the second is to encrypt web communications or other internet communications using HTTPS or protocols, similar protocols. You can also use it for email and instant messaging. But the third-party CAs, these are currently doing the authentication of the certificates, and they're validating the domain name holders. So you're relying on this trust through a third party. Historically, this is based on root certificate trust through root certificate accreditation systems. Most common ones are Microsoft, Apple, and Mozilla. There are others as well, but those are the most common ones. But the weakness is that any CA is able to issue a certificate for any name or organization. So, and this has happened many times. So a CA has inadvertently issued a certificate for Microsoft.com to the wrong organization. You can see the problems that can occur here. So the other problem as well is that if you use this on a web browser, you've got a visible feedback as to whether a certificate looks genuine or a website looks genuine or not. But for automated systems such as email servers, this is all happening in the background. You may not necessarily see this. So this is sort of one of the drawbacks of the current PKI system. I'm going to skip over these. So it's important to implement DNSSEC. In many cases, this is beyond the control of CCTL, beyond the case of NRENs. In some cases, though, the NREN is also running the CCTLD registry. In other cases, it's certainly part of that community, so it has an ability to influence that implementation. But one thing the DNSSEC is not doing, it's not ensuring the correctness of the DNS records. It's checking that when they're transmitted that this is not changed in transit, but it's not actually protecting threats against hosts, and it's not keeping DNS records private, either on the servers or when they're transmitted. So when you send a query, this is by default, submitted in clear text. And this can be you can be eavesdropping on this. This can be monitored, and you can tell a lot about where users are going and what traffic is being sent from the DNS queries. So the IETF has been developing mechanisms to provide some confidentiality to these DNS transactions through what they call the deprive working group. So the aim is to encrypt queries and responses to and from the DNS, from the hosts to the resolvers to prevent monitoring of those queries. So as we know, most queries on the internet are starting from a DNS query. So this is translating human readable names to IP addresses. In some cases, it's not only just revealing what websites or sites that users are visiting, but sometimes some user information is getting embedded into these queries as well, such as a MAC address. And this can allow fingerprinting of individual users. So the idea behind this is that whilst the data in the DNS is public and has to be public, the individual transactions made by an end user shouldn't be public. So there's 3 solutions that have been developed very, very recently. And it must be pointed out, these are only encrypting the transactions from the user host to the DNS resolver. The actual query from the resolver to the authoritative servers, that isn't encrypted. But the aim is to essentially encrypt the last mile there. So you've got something called DNS over TLS, also known as DOT. That was recently published as an RFC. You have DNS over DTLS. That again has been published, although there's currently no implementations of that. And then this slide is actually out of date because DNS over HTTPS has very recently been published only a month ago. So that is now an internet standard, also known as DOE. So I'm not sure what that says about it. And actually, you can use this now. So there's a number of public resolvers that you can test this with, try this. Quad9, well-known public resolver, that's supporting DOT. Cloudflare is supporting both DOT and DNS over HTTPS. And there's another one called Clean Browsing, which supports both of those as well. There's a number of clients that support this, DNS clients, Stubby, and Unbound, even Firefox, later versions are supporting DNS over HTTPS. And actually, Android 9 is now, has this built in, and we've tested it, and it works pretty well. So you can do this now. Just the caveats, both the resolvers and the clients need to be upgraded to support this. There's currently limited support for this in operating systems, although Android is an exception for this, or at least Android 9. I already mentioned that this is only encrypting DNS communications between the clients and the recursive resolvers, not between the resolvers and the authoritative servers. And you still need to be aware that the resolver provider has the potential to monitor and log these transactions, so you need to be trusting your resolver provider as well. None of these things are ensuring the integrity of the information being returned. It's just encrypting it in transmission. So that's why you should use DNSSEC in combination with this as well. But both of these things are important components to improve the security and confidentiality of the DNS. Okay, just one slide. This is the one slide you should pay attention to, if nothing else. There's something called Dns Flag Day coming. And this is based on an issue that a number of extended features of the DNS, such as DNSSEC, require something called eDNS0, extension mechanisms for DNS. And if this has been properly implemented by a name server, the name server should either respond with a eDNS0 compliant response, or it should provide a regular DNS response. The problem is, a lot of the name server software didn't implement this, or resolver software didn't implement this properly. So they had to develop a number of workarounds to allow retries if the name servers don't respond correctly. In some cases, this is old DNS software. In some cases, it's just not been bothered to be updated correctly. But this has been causing a number of problems for a number of years now. So the vendors of the most commonly used DNS software, so that includes Bind, Unbound, PowerDNS, and Not, they've just made a decision they're going to remove these workarounds from the 1st of February next year, and they're just simply not going to support this anymore. So the outcome is that host names served by broken DNS implementations may not get resolved, and you may just disappear off the internet effectively. So there is something you can check. You can check if your domain is affected by going to this website, the Dns Flag Day website. You can type in your domain. That will check whether you're going to be affected by this problem. Well, it's now in, 2 months' time. So if you weren't aware of this, I would advise you to check this and just check that everything is compliant. So that's it. And for more information up on those URLs if you're interested in following up.
Thank you, Kevin. Our next speaker is Ed Moynihan. I can never say your last name. Moynihan. I've known Edward from Internet 2 Days, but today he's representing Indiana University, and he'll be talking to us about NEAR. Thanks.
Hi again, Ed Moynihan is how you pronounce my name, for anyone who cares. I'm from Indiana University in the USA. I'm proud to be selected to speak and honored to be a sponsor of the event this year. We're not sponsoring this event because we're selling anything. We're simply here to promote our partnership with ASREN and to let everyone know that there are initiatives that you can become involved in that ASREN is hosting here that can bring a lot of value to your organization. And within the context of the NEAR project, these cost little to nothing. And we think, again, can provide a lot of value to your local organization and to the region. So quickly, a little bit of an overview of what the NEAR collaboration is. It's funded by the U.S. National Science Foundation. It's a research project, so we're not an NREN per se. We're a research team at a public university in the U.S. We're only 5 people on our team, managing 4 projects. NEAR is now in its 3rd of 4 years in partnership with the organizations you see here, including, you'll see there, ASREN. What is NEAR? So initially NEAR was a follow-up to a project called ACE, which simply provided transatlantic connectivity between the US and Europe. So it was a partnership between Indiana University and GÉANT to provide a 10 gig transatlantic circuit. In this next round of funding, that was increased to a 100 gig circuit. So that's the core of the project. As Alexander mentioned, we are a part of the ANA collaboration. The project was designed as a partnership with GÉANT to include peerings to circuits in and out of Africa and the Middle East. So we peer with circuits coming from South Africa to West Africa. And I believe we peer with the ASREN router in London, although I'm not sure, but we do carry traffic from this region back to the US. But the circuits, funding circuits is not enough. As we've heard a few times over the last few days, you can start with connectivity, but where do you go from there? Our community is really going in the direction of providing services, and the services are what provide value, an added value add to our organizations. And so that's also the case with our project. And we have restrictions on what we can and can't do with National Science Foundation funding. So again, we're a research project, not an NREN. And so it gives us a little less flexibility in what we can and can't sponsor and fund. So we devised a program that focused on the following aspects and really try to tell a narrative of how the networks are being used, to what extent the networks are being used, what type of traffic is on the research networks, what sciences are using these networks, the performance of the networks, and what we can do as a community to help improve the performance, to advocate for greater network utilization, and to share knowledge. So we've been working with our partners to create tools for understanding network utilization. And you see here a static demo of a project we call NetSage, which collects SNMP data, T-stat, flow data, Personar data, and uses Grafana to create simple visualizations of traffic volume on circuits. And this is an example of the NA collaboration. So this is just a screenshot of a dynamic visualization, real-time visualization of traffic flows over ANA. We're expanding this, hopefully to include circuits down to Africa, and it's certainly something that we could do for this region if there's interest in seeing the international data flows in and out of the region. So once we understand the traffic volume, I know this is impossible to see with these slides, but we started an effort to see what kind of traffic is on our networks. So we're tagging flow data as it comes across our circuits with science domains. It's a little bit of a manual effort, so before the flows are de-identified, we actually have grad students and interns who are manually going in and looking at who the users are, tagging the flows with, for example, this is bioinformatics data, this is astronomy data, and over the course of a few years, we're able to do, I think we have about 60 to 70% coverage of all of the flows that we see on a weekly basis. And then we're able to create visualizations that show, and importantly, can show our funders, hey, 60% of what you're funding is for support of astronomy, 30% is for bioinformatics, et cetera, et cetera. If you can read this, you'll see the top, in this example, the top user is network testing. It's probably Personar testing, which we'll get to. And so once we understand what the science domains are using the network, we dig a little bit deeper and try to identify specific collaborations, so the specific top talkers over the NEAAR circuit. And I just did a little bit of research at the last quarter of flow data as I was sitting here in the conference the last few days, looking at who the top talkers are for a few countries here in the region. So I looked at Jordan, Algeria, and Egypt. It's a very simple process. And you'll see here, and I won't walk through all of these, but it gives us a real sense. And we talk a lot about collaborations and science stories, and we provide so much value to the community. But do we really understand at an organizational level who's really using that, whose packets are moving across our networks? And we can learn a lot from this. We can learn about, we can learn who to engage in our community. We can develop community engagement strategies. We can use other tools to determine whether or not these top talkers are getting the performance that they should be getting, that their expectations are being met. For example, we can look at who's not here. Who do we think is using the network that's not? And again, so if your country is here, this is all just the last couple months, and if anybody is interested in learning about who's collaborating between the US and your region, we have this data, we can look into it, and it can help us begin a collaboration to support them. So we have volume, we have domain science, we have individual collaborations, and that gives us a baseline for moving towards performance enhancement. And we've really been working with our partners within NEAAR to promote the usage of Personar. I don't know how many people here are familiar with it. This could be a day-long Personar talk, but simply Personar is a toolkit that allows your engineers to make sure that your network is operating at peak performance. And it's a collection of open source software on simple, inexpensive boxes that you can put anywhere on your network. anywhere in your campus network, outside of the border router, at any domain in your collaboration, you can stick one of these persona boxes and test against it to have a better understanding, to set a baseline for performance, to set expectations, and then see how your network is performing against those expectations over time. It allows you to archive this data so you can see performance over certain periods. Again, this gives you important information to go back to your funders and your engineers to determine network future planning, etc. Once you create a persona or mesh within your network, it allows you to do things like look at packet loss and throughput, but also allows you to create a mesh, a visualization of performance. It's very simple. You can scroll over the mesh you see here, and it gives you real-time data on how your network is performing. I believe this is a South African mesh here, but we're working to create some in the region as well. We've completed persona trainings as part of the NEAAR collaboration in the countries and regions you see here. And most importantly, you'll see at the bottom, we're working with Redouan and our partners in Morocco to sponsor an ASREN persona training workshop in April of 2019. And we do encourage you, and Yousif will be getting in touch with ASREN members with a little more information about the timing and the content and what you need to do to get involved. But everyone is welcome to attend this. We provide the nodes. You provide the engineers. You get to take home the nodes. We provide training on how to use them, how to set up the archives. And you take them home, play with them, and if your organization wants more training, you can apply via our website, and potentially we can come and do a training specific to your NREN organization. So we know who's using the network. We know how to increase their performance, and these give us the tools we need to engage with our users. And so all of these elements come together to allow us to, if we notice a problem in the network, it allows us to go and fix it. If we don't notice problems in the network, it allows us to go out and work directly with the end users to help improve their workflow. So they think that they're utilizing the resources efficiently, but we can go in and do we understand their workflow, their science workflow, and it allows you to do engagement whether or not the network is performing at peak performance or not. So we have, this is another award that we have from the NSF. It's called EPIC. It's a centralized hub in the US for performance engagement, and this also includes international partnerships. I'd be happy to talk more about this if anyone's interested. And finally, we're working in the NEAR partnership on exploring possibilities for open exchange deployments. Alexander talked about the value of open exchanges. We do have support within NEAR to provide open exchange equipment where it's needed most. And I put this most recent map of the EU-funded circuits in this region. I wish there was a map that showed the Gulf states and the Gulf connections to Europe. And we want to explore the possibilities of, if we put an exchange here, are all of these circuits, I think there's more than 10 individual circuits coming from this region to Europe. Is there a way that we could put equipment locally that would help provide services locally, help keep local traffic local, providing a central point of interaction for external entities to connect to in the region, and potentially bring down the costs for all participating organizations. Again, we're just discussing this to see if it's a possibility. We'd be happy to talk to anyone who thinks this might be of value to them. And finally, we're looking at what services might be valuable over the next 5 years. So if there's things that aren't a part of the current project that could be useful in the next round, we're talking to ASREN, we're talking to partners about what those things might look like. I've just listed a few here. Improving routing is one that we've already started thinking about. I see a lot of flow data, flow pairs from this region that go up to Europe, across the US, across the Atlantic, across the US, across the Pacific, and then into Asia. That's that's inefficient routing. And we need a venue within region and globally to start looking at these anomalies to see if there's things we can do to make data flows more efficient. I'm not saying that that's wrong or there's a problem, but we need a venue for discussing that. Another thing we're thinking about is database mirroring. You know, a lot of traffic is pulling data from archives in Europe and the US. You know, we could fund boxes that we put into networks locally and mirror these archives that would again keep traffic local, so you wouldn't have to be pulling this data from sources abroad. Again, these are just ideas. Happy to talk about what the next round of services might look like. Happy to be here, happy to talk to anyone else, and wish everybody a good conference. Thanks.
Thank you, Ed. Our next speaker is Brook Schofield. He's a project development officer at GÉANT, and he looks after international expansion of EduRoam and EduGAIN. He's been key in getting EduRoam and EduGAIN getting up in Lebanon. And he's working on a project to be identity federation for the Asia Pacific. So, Brook, all yours.
Thank you. So yeah, I have a 15-minute window to do a presentation to allow 2 minutes of questions at the end of the session, so wonderful. When I was doing this presentation, I first started actually with the title Federation Development and Deployment Expertise, subtitled Listening to the Community, but actually I decided that listening to the community, do I do this? I do this? Listening to the community actually is more important, and this is a thing that we actually failed on. I have an overly large picture of my head on this screen because I don't have my badge with me. But this is actually for the benefit of those that download the slides, not the people in the room. But if you want to contact me, there's some contact information. It's maybe too small. Those for good eyesight, they can contact me and talk to someone with good eyesight if you want to know how to reach me. But I'm available, email, Slack. You can even call me. My WhatsApp now works because I fixed my broken phone. I'm talking about a family of services that we look after in GÉANT, EduRoam and EduGAIN. And actually the story I'm going to tell you starts back with a project to support the Latin American community. Back in June 2012, we kicked off a project to try and get, if you can see the map, you can't see much of the world there because it's not well filled in at that point in time, but Latin America is well described. And the red countries were the target areas for this project. And so what we did is we took, our deployment guides of how to do EduRoam, how to do Identity Federation, how to do EduGAIN to that community. And so this was the deployment model we followed, and it seems to be the deployment model that many of you have been told about. Start off with EduRoam, an NREN-based federated radius service. You work on campus radius and you build hotspots. And once you've completed that, you move on to Web Single Sign-On, a campus identity provider. You start federating your campus services. Once you've got some momentum there, you build a SAML identity federation at the NREN level. The NREN itself creates an identity provider. The NREN connects services to that. And once you have all of those building blocks in place, then you expand to international collaboration through EduGAIN, build a federation policy, and start sharing some services. What we actually found when we did this is we had a fair bit of resistance, interestingly, for the Chilean NREN. Chilean NREN was actually quite well, capable at that time. Its campuses were quite capable. So, at the end, if you look at the transition here, we actually had quite some success. The removal of the red colour is the good thing, the fact that work began in that region as a result at the end of the project. But what we got back from that project wasn't just the fact that everyone was happy and wanting to play in a wider community. We actually picked a different deployment guide from that. We actually found, led by the Chileans, they were not so much interested in EduRoam. Their campuses already had Wi-Fi. They didn't have identity management systems, by and large, and they said, actually, it's a lot of work for us to put this in place just to get back to having authenticated Wi-Fi. Right? We don't see the value proposition in doing this, was the message from their universities. They wanted REUNA, the Chilean Federation of Chilean NREN, to build COFRE, their identity federation. build this framework of sharing services in the first instance and create a SAML federation that had the goal of joining EDUGAIN, that the NREN would participate in that. And I've italicized, and maybe you can't see that, italicized NREN services because now NREN services are not so important at this early stage because there's a range of services that you can access through EDUGAIN. You can lean on your international partners for access to services at this point in time. You know, all of the work that Jisc has done in engaging the different content providers. SURFnet have a range of services through its NRENs. GÉANT itself runs a demo file sender instance that people can play with, so you can actually do a lot of things by doing nothing at this point. Then when you go to your campuses have something to use once they build an identity provider. Once they start playing in this sandbox, there are things that they can participate in. So your universities see value very early on, right? They're not spending all of their time doing a login system just to get to the help desk portal of the NREN, right? This was very, very common in early versions of the Identity Federation in Australia, that all of the universities could log into either a wiki or the help desk system of another university. And that was basically it. And so it was very good for the technical people to say, look how fabulous this is, but all of the researchers said, there's nothing in there for us, right? There's no value for us to participate. And actually, once the campuses have put all these building blocks in place, EduRoam is actually very, very simple, right? It's just a small radius server on top of all of their existing infrastructure. The campuses say, yeah, this makes sense now. We've put all of the hard work in place. We did identity management to get access to this wide services. And so one of the things, I guess, from the GÉANT point of view was don't just speak, but listen, right? We came with a deployment model, and we actually didn't know that there was a different way of doing it until the end of the project. We sort of had a missed opportunity there. We spent all of our time thinking, and the reason we did this is because this is how we did it in Europe. And why did we do it in Europe this way? Because we had more than a decade to do it. We had time on our side, right? We developed EduRoam first, so we spent time doing that. You know, 3 or 4 years down the road, Identity Federation started to pop up. Okay, we've done the EduRoam trick, we can focus on this. When you end up in a community that doesn't have the luxury of time, you want to participate in the global research community now or yesterday, you have to look for a different deployment model. And we should have known that we should have did some listening, because actually GÉANT and its precursor Terrainer actually has, this is a map of all of our special interest groups and task forces. We actually spend a lot of time collaborating with our members and listening, and for some reason we had forgotten that for this project, right? We focused on deployment because we thought we had nailed that. We didn't actually listen to the needs of our campuses and the needs of those partner NRENs, and that's, you know, sort of my lesson that I'm giving you. In fact, if I'm, did I actually start this timer? Yeah, so if I'm doing the 7-minute version of my presentation, I stop now. And so it depends whether you have questions or Yousif wants to yank me off the stage. But you know, that's the short version. You actually need to customize this deployment in your own regions. Now, I've got the contact details of people from Iraq and Syria and Comoros, and some new contacts in Egypt. Habib from Tunisia is going to talk to me. We're working with, well, we've got a long-term collaboration with Oman and renewed interest in Saudi. So, you know, we've got people that want to work with us, and we want to work with you, but actually there needs to be some customization in how you do this. Barring questions, I'll continue to talk. So actually, this is EduRoam, 101 territories doing the production service at this point in time, and actually, GÉANT isn't responsible for a lot of this, right? You might see GÉANT up on stage and presenting, but actually EduRoam started because actually the idea came out of SURFnet. This is an email that Klaas Urenga sent. Klaas now works for GÉANT after, you know, poisoning his mind by working for a commercial in the meantime. But, you know, this was actually fed from our NREN members. And so we don't sit around and magic these things up. We do them based on community need. In fact, we actually looked at 3 options in total. 2 options, you know, looked at and rejected. Open Wi-Fi and VPNs as an alternative to EduRoam, and this web redirect. Now, the web redirect that you see in hotels like this actually do the thing that Kevin was talking about, right? They intercept your DNS traffic to force you to a portal page, and you are cut off from the internet at this point in time. You don't know whether that Marriott landing page is actually from Marriott because you're not connected to the internet, right? You're in a sandbox environment. This could be a site running on someone's laptop. And you don't know that because your laptop can't independently verify that. And you need internet connectivity for that. And so particularly some of these sites, I mean, maybe people don't pay for Wi-Fi much anymore, but still there are some airports where they want you to give out a lot of information, or they do want payment information, and you can't trust that website. So this is how we got to eduroam. But actually eduroam has a story earlier than this of the modem, the university modem pool. Now, you might not have university modem pools anymore. You might find it very interesting, you know, when your daughter remembers hearing this sound because it pops up on an ancient TV show. But actually, the Netherlands actually had modem pools. Even my university did, but we had 8 modem lines in total in Launceston. But anyway, you could call the modem pool that was closest to you because phone calls were expensive in the Netherlands, and actually they used Radius to backhaul the authentication that you could call a competing university's modem pool and get access to the internet, right? Magic. And so once Wi-Fi came along, you could use this infrastructure for something else, right? You didn't have to, you could use this Radius infrastructure for access points. And so this is how, you know, it plays out. It always phones home to your home institution. And if you get your username and password right, you get connected to a guest VLAN. If you're a roaming operator, if you don't have eduroam in your territory, if you're missed off that map, this is what you're responsible for. You need to have a Radius server that will talk to the upstream world. If you're at a campus, you need access points that talk to a wireless controller that either talk to a local user database or talk upstream to your roaming operator, your NREN. This is some slides actually from Jisc about, it's quite an old visualization now, but it's actually a map of where eduroam gets used. This was built by Mark O'Leary quite some time ago. This really big red dot, if you can see it, is not London, right? So when they first did this, they said, well, clearly the dot's in the wrong spot, right? Everyone goes to London to collaborate. We've got something wrong, the dot's in the wrong spot. And it took them a while to look at stuff and they go, no, actually, no, the dot is not in the wrong spot. The dot's in the right spot. Then why is it so big? Right? If that's not London, why is that big? And so it turned out there were 3, I think they were technical colleges, that were actually collaborating on sharing learning resources, right? They were sharing course content. If you wanted to do high-end physics and mathematics, you had to walk down the road and go to a different college to do that. Right? You didn't have to enroll in that college. You can take your tablet with you because they have eduroam. You just get on the network. It's magic. And so what was happening, and there was a huge amount of mobility between this cluster of colleges, which generated this eduroam traffic. You know? This is permissionless innovation, right? The NREN puts the building blocks in place, and as Ed said, right, they have to look at the analytics of the network to find out what people are doing, because people won't always tell you. In fact, this is Yousif as well, right, did a presentation, right? You don't actually know what your researchers are doing on the network. You can presume that, but you have to talk to them. Or you have to start mining your own information and then go back to talking to them. So we have a lot of services built on top. eduroam Cat, the configuration assistant tool, we built this because people were getting eduroam wrong a lot, and they get it wrong on the client. And why do they get it wrong on the client? Because your help desks have at least this many clients to deal with. So we worked on a project where you could build installers for your campuses and get it right every single time. And that means when there's a problem, it's not the user's device. It could be the username and password, it could be the infrastructure, but we want to get the configuration right every time. And this is also added because the network itself is complex, right? Depending on how you store passwords depends on how you can implement eduroam. It makes it more complex. Federations got built, right? This happened because there was single sign-on happening on campus. But the federations were traditionally national, luckily, they largely converged on one protocol, which was SAML2. This wasn't universal. They used aselect in the Netherlands. They used PAPI in Spain, and there were we had some weird homegrown things in Australia. When we talked to people, they said, well, wait a minute, isn't this like EduRoam? Why are you building a system that isn't inherently interoperable, right? It doesn't make sense anymore. So actually we built EduGAINT as a result. The global authentication infrastructure, we renamed the definition, but people like the name and they like the concept. And so we have EduGAINT now in 58 production territories. They're the dark colours on the planet. I actually bothered to update this map, so if you saw my presentation on Saturday, this is now accurate. Has Pakistan and Russia correctly described. But once we had EduGAINT, we built other services on top of that as well. People wanted things to make their lives easier. One of those things is edu-teams for all of the different research groups you have out there. How do you do group management? You know, you've solved the username and password problem. Now it's annoying doing group management because all of these people are in different countries and different institutions. How do we create, embody a virtual organization? And so we have edu-teams as a service coming on board real soon now. And then within Europe, all of our infrastructure is, you know, how do you do the security, right? Because once you've got this interconnected environment, if someone gets an account from any institution of this interconnected world, then you have a problem. And actually in Europe, we've solved this because we had time. We had CSIRTs, right? Every NREN in Europe basically got a computer security emergency response team because they had the time to do this. This was a thing to do. But it wasn't universal. We didn't always have CSIRTs, and as we expanded EduRoam and EduGAINT quickly, we realized that there was a gap. And actually we built Certify as a trust framework to try and allow institutions to validate themselves, their own security practices, when they don't have access to a CSIRT. It's not provided by the NREN or not provided by the government at this point in time, right? So this is listening to the community. We think you're going to have this problem in the future. Do something for us now. And that's how we grow an effort through the community and make it available wider. We also get this question every so often, why do you have your own certificate service when there's a service like Let's Encrypt that exists, right? You can now get these free TLS certificates, domain validated through Let's Encrypt. They use the ACME protocol. It's good to deploy. Your DevOps people love it. Well, one of the reasons is TCS actually existed way before Let's Encrypt. And TCS actually offers a lot more, right? There's definitely the TLS certificates that everyone knows and loves in your web browser, but actually there's certificates for the grid community. So if you're not a participant in the grid community, you don't have a IGTF recognized grid distributor, or you're not members of EU Grid PMA. I don't know if there's one specific for Africa, but I think most of the Gulf states in Northern Africa liaise with EU Grid PMA. You can get certificates from DigiCert through the TCS service that are actually recognised by this community. You can get client certificates that you can embed in your email to secure your email. You can get certificates for code signing. In fact, we use these for the EduRoam CAT installers. So when you install this software on your phone or on your laptop doesn't say, are you sure you want this profile installed on your phone? This could be dodgy, right? It's going to install some certificates. It's going to, enable some wireless communication options. So we use code signing certificates so your devices don't complain about these installers, right? And we pass that bar. And you can use it for document signing and other things. And I think we're getting very close to the end, or I really, really hope we are, because we're now cutting into lunch. So, where is EduRoam and ASREN? Right, this is what the map looks like at this point in time, and we've got some collaboration. We've got maybe no one from Mauritania here, but if you want to get in touch, do so. This is what ASREN and EduGAINT looks like, right? We've got some initial work happening in Saudi, so it paints the region well, but there's a lot of gaps in that map. And so I'm not sure if ASREN is talking as a community, but I'm not hearing you. So that's why I'm here, so you can get in touch with me. But I really do hope you have your own groups at your campus, at your NREN level, that are discussing these topics, and that you do reach out, and we can put you back in touch with people in your own backyard, and hopefully do something great. Thank you.
Thank you, Brook. It's about 12:30, so I don't want to hold you up, but we have a few minutes for a few questions. Do we have microphones?
Two quick questions. One is for Kevin Meynell. It seems to me it's very interesting what you presented. It is one of the problems we have to solve in cybersecurity. Where it matters, it is a sort of application of blockchain technology. But the point is, as you stated, that there is no check on what is inside of their transportation. And the second thing is the data you quoted of your experimentation, if I understood correctly, have to do with Middle Asia. And they were all republics of the Russian Federation. Is there not the interest of Kaspersky in this kind of activity in order to offer solutions, better solutions for security? Because what you have done is quite an very, very interesting approach. So I was just curious about that. And excuse me, the second question is for the colleague. I don't understand what you mean by certifications, because so far, as you know, in Europe, there is a big fuss about the certification of infrastructure, products and services as far as security is concerned. We don't know how the struggle will be concluded, but the paradox would be that certain products could be swept out of the market. So this is a very important point. So I was shocked by the idea that there could be some kind of certification, which at the moment is rather probabilistic. Yeah, I mean, what do you mean by certification in this context, European context?
I don't mean in the European context, I mean in a...
No, you said that you offer certification. Certification as far as the European networks, as you know very well, now is facing a struggle as far as what is called the new directive having to do with certification. So I was wondering what it meant.
My issue is entirely limited to whether you get a green lock in your browser. So certification as in trusting the website that you're visiting. It's got nothing to do with education.
Right. We're talking about technical certificates. These are not education certifications. Kevin, do you?
Yes, apologies that they had the old slide with non-Middle East information, but I might have been interested to have Central Asia on there anyway. So in answer to the question, I mean, I think they're slightly two different ways of implementing DNSSEC and the DNS privacy. So the DNSSEC really has to be implemented at the TLD level. I mean, you can implement this at your own domain level, but unless there's a chain of trust higher up, then it's ineffective.
But who
So,
were the registrars?
sorry?
Who were the DNS registrars that participated in the...
Well, okay, in Central Asia, a lot of people are registering in Russia or using Russian services, so that would be a fair point. Kyrgyzstan is a little bit different, but yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes?
If I understood well, you've said that through Sonar you have been able to keep up-to-date information on basically community collaboration in particular research domains. If I understood...
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I'm not sure.
If I understood well what you have presented through the part where you talked about personnel and performance monitoring and understanding of network traffic, you've said, I think, that you have been able to identify community collaboration and maintain up-to-date information on the intensity of collaboration between...
Yeah, so Perf Sonar as a tool can't do that, no. But these are two separate efforts. So Sonar allows you to monitor the overall performance of the network. The other tools that we're using are designed to go deeper and identify specific collaborations. And there's just a sort of a cluster of tools that we're using to get that information, and then together.
So you have additional scripts and code to go deep, and
yes, exactly.
And that code is not available for the community. It's a proprietary code, or
it's something we could talk to you about. Yeah.
Go visit Right Analyst and Right Stat. That they can do a lot of visualizations on network paths. There's a lot of good stuff there. Maybe we should get Ed to actually do a write-up for the Right Labs community on that work, because it might be generally applicable and repeatable for others.
Any other questions? I guess everybody's hungry. Oh, one more.
The DNS protocol you discussed is still yes, man. Is still a developed system or production now?
Well, it's they're all. You mean the DNS privacy? So the DNS over TLS. So DNSSEC, DNS over TLS, DNS over HTTPS are all internet standards. With DNS over TLS and even DNS over HTTPS, there are implementations now in production systems. There are public resolvers that you can use this. There are also some client implementations as well. It's not in all operating systems. I think at the moment only Android 9 is supporting this, but it will be pretty soon, I would think, in Microsoft and Apple as well. So certainly, yes, you can. At the moment you have to you specifically configure your OS or your browser and point to a public resolver that supports this. But yes, you can use it now.
A defense layer as a firewall.
Sorry.
It's a defense layer behind the firewall.
Well, it will be the encryption will be between the client and the resolver. So it may be behind a firewall, but the resolver will be essentially a public service, or it will be your ISP's service they're providing. It may or may not be behind a firewall. It would depend on the network configuration.
All right. Well, thank you to our speakers. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy your lunch.